Today we're going to convert your mail merge into separate PDF documents. Now if you started down this rabbit hole, you'll know that mail merge produces one massive document, and whether you convert to PDF first or later, you've somehow got to split this up. And the processes for doing this, at least those on Google, are either really complicated or require a third-party plugin. So we're going to avoid either of those today. But that's not the only problem. If you somehow manage to get through the process and create separate PDF documents, you'll find that they're called something completely useless, like document 1, document 2, document 752. And you're going to spend the next 2 or 3 hours renaming all these files before you can send them to the recipients or file them away. It's a colossal waste of time, and that's the second thing we're going to avoid today. So how are we going to do this? We're going to give you a Word macro that you can copy and paste into your Word system to automate the process of saving out your mail merge into individual documents and exporting as PDFs. Better than that, the macro is set up to read a folder path and a file name from the mail merge data itself to specify the name of the file and where you want to save this. I cannot stress how powerful this is. When you set up your Word mail merge data, you'll typically do it as a table in Excel. And that means you've got all the Excel formulas available to you to define the name and the save to location. So if you want to have a name or a date or a reference number in there, you can. If you want to have some kind of group identifier in there, you can. The choice is entirely yours. And more importantly, you're not limited just to the file name. You can do it with the folder path as well. So if you've got, say, one folder for every recipient, you can save the PDF directly into that folder. You don't have to later on filing it, saving you, again, a colossal amount of time. So how are we going to do this? Well, the first thing we need to do is to get the macro into your Word system. We provide the macro on our website in plain text format. So you need to just copy it from there and paste it into Word. But don't worry, we will go through all of this in this video so you can see every single step. Second step, we'll set up the data in Excel and the Word mail merge in Word and then run it so you can see how it works. And then finally, as a bonus, we will go through every single line of the code, line by line, showing you exactly what it does in Word, how it automates Word. And with that in mind, we've written the code not in a purist fashion, but rather to be as understandable, as readable as possible to the layman. And finally, to answer the last question that you probably have, what's the point in creating a PDF if I can't then send it to people? We've got another video coming out where we'll use the Word mail merge email feature and a macro to send emails with attachments and actually in fact custom subject matters and a CC box as well, neither of which are available in the standard version of mail merge to email. But that's another video, we'll deal with that later. So now let's get to it. So here we are in Windows Explorer where we have a folder containing our data as an Excel spreadsheet and our letter as a Word document. Now, for anyone using some kind of cloud or sharing service such as SharePoint or Dropbox, you'll need to make sure that your service is synced with your computer so that you have a local folder which appears. The process of Word saving a PDF does not allow direct saving to, for example, SharePoint. So for us here we have the demo SharePoint site and then we've just got the folder called end of year inside that. So this will be saving effectively directly to SharePoint but doing so via a synced folder. So with that out of the way, let's actually get on with the job. So first things first, let's open up Word and we will add the macro in. Now if you're joining us here, the macro is on our website in the article linked to this video, so if you're watching the video on the website, it's below, and if you are watching this on, say, YouTube, please look in the description below where you'll find a link to the article on the website where the text of the macro is. So let's open up Word, and here is our letter. So first things first, as I promised, we'll do the macro. So the way you can add a macro to your system is using this developer tab up here. Now if you don't have this appearing, that's perfectly normal for Word, they hide it by default, and the way you make it appear is you just click in the ribbon anywhere and you go to customize the ribbon here and you click the checkbox next to developer in this right hand column. Once done, press OK and the developer tab will appear. And this brings you the Visual Basic and Macro button on the left hand side here. So to bring up Visual Basic, where we're going to add our macro in, we click the Visual Basic button and this brings up the Visual Basic editor. If your Visual Basic editor doesn't look exactly like this, don't worry. All we need is this project panel to appear, and if yours doesn't, you can find it by clicking View here and Project Explorer or pressing Ctrl R here. So once done, you should have this panel appearing, if not on the left, then at least somewhere on your screen. The Project Explorer looks a lot like Windows Explorer. You've got folders and they contain files, and the files contain text which define your macros. And all we're going to do is create a new little text file and paste our macro into it, and that makes it available. Now you can see here we've got two top level entities here. We've got one called normal and one called project brackets letter. Now this normal one is the so-called normal template, and this is a default template in Word, and it's used to store all your defaults. You can define styles in it, but you can also define macros in it. And normal is opened every time you open Word, so that's really the best place to save any macro that you want to be able to access repeatedly. Project letter refers to the letter template which we've just opened, and well, we could save our macro in there. It will only therefore be available to that one letter, and once we closed it, it won't be available anywhere else. So I would recommend that we insert it into normal, and the way we insert it is we simply right click, go to insert and module. And having done that, we find here that this modules folder will be created if it hasn't been created already, and we've got module 1 appearing. And all we need to do is to go to the website, select the text of the macro, copy it and paste it in. And I'm just going to right click, I've already copied it, and paste, and there we go. So the text is now in there. I will go through the text in detail later on, but all you need to know is this sub and this end sub, that defines our macro, that defines the macro name, and this green text down the side tells you what each line is doing. We'll run through this in detail in the video later on, but right now that's what we've got. And having copied and pasted our macro in, we can close this down. So our system is ready to go with that macro. In fact, the way we'd run the macro later on is we click macros, and there it is. It's ready to go, but we're not ready to run it yet because we haven't set up our data. So quickly, let's just look at our template. This is a very simple letter template. I'm sure you'll want to do something far more detailed for your own work, but for us, all we've got is we've got a full name field here, we've got a known as field here for the salutation, and finally, we're going to give them an end of year compliment because we're nice like that. And so everybody's got an individualized compliment which goes in this one. I've already set this up as a mail merge, so the recipients are already selected and the fields have already been added. So this is done and we are ready to look at the data. So let's now open up the Excel spreadsheet. The first three columns on the left are as you might expect. We've got one called full name, one called known as, and one called compliment. And these correspond to the three fields that you saw in the mail merge. In addition to this, we've created 4 additional columns: doc folder path, doc file name, PDF folder path, and PDF file name. Now the names of these columns are important and need to be exactly as you see here. The spaces have been removed and the first letter of each word has been capitalized. This enables the macro to know where to save and with what name each of the doc and PDF files. So what we need to do is to put in the relevant data. So first of all, doc folder path. This is where we want to save all of the Word documents. Now the process requires you to save a Word document before converting to PDF. So because we have to save it, we might as well save it somewhere useful, and even if you just delete it all afterwards, it doesn't really matter. And the way we go about finding the doc folder path is we look at Windows Explorer, and we simply need to find the folder we want to save the documents into. Like here, I've got this ready-made one called docs, and we click in the address bar here, make sure it's all selected, and we copy the text. Once done, we can simply click on the cell and paste the data. And there it is. That is the folder path already set up for the documents. Now in the beginning of the video I did promise that we could have much more complicated folder paths, and indeed you could do this, but we're not going to do that here. However, if you wanted to, you could always use a formula and, for example, have a subfolder of docs. Whatever you do, please be advised that you do need the folders to already exist in the system before you run this macro. The macro won't create the folders for you. So we'll keep it simple. We're going to save all the Word documents into docs. So I'm just going to double click on the corner here, and that fills it all the way down into each of the 5 rows. So for the doc file name, we need to make sure each of them are unique because they're all going into the same folder. And to do this, I am going to simply use the full name and some kind of description of the content. So I'm going to make a formula. We'll put an equals, a quote, and we'll just call this end of year letter to, and then we'll add in, using the ampersand to combine text, the name. So there it is, we have a formula, and I'm just going to double click here and paste it down. And so here we have each file will be called end of year letter to, and it's each of our names. Now you'll notice I haven't included the extension, the docx extension. That will be automatically added by the macro. If you do inadvertently add it, you'll just find that your file is called docx. It will still work. So next up, the PDF folder path. Coming back to Windows Explorer, we've already created a PDFs folder as well. Again, you could go much more complex, but we're going to keep ours simple and save all the PDFs into one folder. So I've copied the text and I'll paste it in there. And once again, double click to fill down. And there we go. We've set up our PDF folder path. So finally, the PDF file name. And we could make it exactly the same as the Word document file name. That is not a problem. So I've copied the formula there and pasted it down. So this is the same as the doc file name. So that is our data set up. We know now from this data that we'll save all the Word documents into the folder called docs. We will call them end of year letter plus the name. And the PDFs will go into a folder called PDFs. And each of the letters will have their own name. So this is all set up. We are ready to go. Okay, so here we are back in Windows Explorer. I'm going to reopen the letter and we will put this onto the left-hand side so that we can see the letter, and we'll zoom out quickly so we can see the whole letter. So here's our letter, and on the right-hand side, what we're going to open up is the two folders. This is the docs folder and this is the PDF folder. So we can see the files as they're created within these two folders. So to run it, we click in the Developer tab here, press Macros, and here's our macro ready to go. So press Run. And so as this runs, you can see here that in each of the folders, the Word documents are created, followed by the PDFs. And so there we go. The process has been completed, and we have 5 docx letters and 5 PDFs. So let's just check one of them. We'll check Bethany's, open this up, and here we are. Bethany Klein, Dear Beth, and Beth is indeed superb. So our process has worked. We've got named PDF. They have the contents of the mail merge. We have succeeded. So that's it. Please go off, have a play, use the code. And finally, it's time for the running through of the VBA macro in its entirety. So here we are back in VBA, where we're going to run through the macro and see how it performs the mail merge. So on the right hand side, we have all this green text. These are called comments, and they're defined by this single quote, and everything after the single quote is green. And green text is ignored by the computer, so we can write whatever we want there, and typically you use these to give a description in real world terms of what the line does. Now I'm going to tell you what these lines do, which will roughly correspond to this green text over here. So the first line here, sub mail merge to PDF. This defines a subroutine, which is the same as a macro, and gives it a name, mail merge to PDF. That's all this line does. The brackets you can ignore. The first line of our subroutine here, dim master doc, record number, and single doc. What this does, this sets up what are called variables. And the best thing to do is think of the variables as post-it notes. So what we've done is we've collected 3 post-it notes together, we've put them on our desk, and we've scribbled onto them a name, master doc, record number, and single document. And that's really all we need to think about at this time. So next line here is we set master doc, remember this is just a post-it note, to the active document. And if we bring back Word, when we click go on our macro, we have a document that's front and center. This is the active document, and this being our mail merge document is the one we want to identify. So we identify this as master document, and now we know which one this is every single time we want to refer to it. We don't have to worry about other documents getting in the way or anything getting confused here. So once that's done, what we're going to do is we're going to run what's called a for loop, and that starts with a for here and runs through to this next line here. And what this does is this runs the code in the middle from here to here a fixed number of times. Each time it runs it, this value here, record number, another post-it note, will have a different value. So conceptually you might say this is a bit like putting a number 1 onto a bit of paper, handing it to an assistant saying going off and getting that file or doing something with it. They come back, you put a different one on, and you send them off again, and you do it each and every time. So this loop will run from record number 1 through to this thing here, which, don't worry about it just yet, but this defines the total number of records. And to give you a feeling of how this would work in the mail merge, if I preview the results here so we can actually see the data, this is a bit like going to 1, and then we'll do something, and then we'll click onto 2, do something, click onto 3. And in fact, we'll show you all these steps as we do them. So let's go back to our code. This bit, as I said previously, this is the total number of records within your mail merge. And here we're just going to have a quick glimpse of how a macro can identify different things as it runs. So we've already identified that the master document is the, well, active document, the document with the mail merge template in it, and that contains the mail merge data as well. So what this does, this is like an address. So we start with the top level thing, the master document. We say, I want to drill down into that and give me the mail merge that's associated with that document. Inside that mail merge, we drill down again. We identify the data source. That is the Excel spreadsheet we provided it. And we go into that and we say, give me the record count, i.e. the number of rows in that Excel spreadsheet. So this will return, in our case, the number 5. We only had 5 records set up for it. But in your case, it could be any number of records. So all this does is this defines total number of records in our mail merge and puts an end condition for this for loop, so it only runs up to that total number. Again, coming back to Word, this is a little bit like clicking this skip to the end last record button, and there it is. The last record's 5, so that would be the record count 5. For the next steps, I'm going to close down the Project Explorer over here, and I'm going to push this to the left hand side so we can see the mail merge data on the right, and we have here our code on the left. And the reason I'm doing this is to show you exactly how this works with the mail merge. So the first line, master.mailmerge.datasource.active record equals record number. Now remember, record number is set to 1 for the first iteration of the loop, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, and it ends. And this is the same as going to mailings and going under previous results to here and just simply entering the correct record number. So in our case, we start with 1. So I put in a 1, press enter, and there we go. We've gone now to the first record, Adam Griffith. So that's what this does. In the background, this is really important because later on, every time we refer to the data of the mail merge to find out the save locations and the file names, we want to make sure that we're pulling it from the right row. So this says we are looking at row 1 or 2 or 3, depending on what record number is. So next up, master.mailmerge.destination equals WD sent a new document. This is the same as clicking finish and merge and going here to edit individual documents. So we click on that and we get this up. So that's what this line does. This is done in the background, so you wouldn't actually ever see this, this window here appear, but in the background that's effectively what it's doing. So next up, we set the master.mailmerge data source first record to record number, and the last record to the record number. And that's the same as going here, from and to, and putting a 1 in both boxes, because we start at 1. Finally, master.mailmerge.execute false. And that's the same as clicking OK. So literally all that code has done is exactly what you saw me do there. And it has done this mail merge for the first record. And here it is, only 1 letter. It's 1 page long. This is quite simply the first document that's been extracted and has been created as a new document. So the thing we now need to do is to slap a post-it note onto that new document so we know what it is. So we set the single doc to this, and while it says active document, and yes, active document was used up here as well, this is now the active document being the front document, and this one, the letter document, is no longer the active document. It will still have the master doc post-it note on it, but here at the front, active document is this one, and this now has the single doc post-it note on it. So having identified this new active document, which is the result of our mail merge, just 1 record remember, we now need to save it and we need to export it as PDF. And this first set of 4 lines here, this is in fact 1 line of code, but it's been split over 4 lines. This saves the document as a Word document. And that's the same as clicking here, going to save as, choosing a folder, and naming your file and saving it. Next up, we have another 4 lines here, and this is the same as going up to File and going to Save as Adobe PDF. Again, choosing a folder, giving it a file name, and saving it. So finally, having done all that, we can close the document. Now, I haven't saved this one, but if you had, you would not get that window to ask you to save it because it would have been saved. And that's what this line here does. It closes the document, and now we're ready to do the next result. So this line here, next record number, this tells us we're going to increment record number by 1, and then we're going to go all the way up here to this 4 and repeat the process again. So that would be equivalent of going here, putting in a 2, going here, edit individual documents, set that to 2, set that to 2, open it up, save it, close it. So that's the process that we've automated. And once it's done it for all of our records in our data sets, we get to end sub, and that has finished the macro. So before we go, let's have a quick look at the detail of the save as step and the export as PDF step. So while these are over 4 lines, they are in fact one single line. This little underscore here says go onto a new line, but don't start a new code line. So this is one single command, and at the top we tell it we're saving, and then it's just got 2 options here which have the name of the option here, file name and then file format, followed by a colon and an equals. And so the file name is not just the file name, but is actually the file path in its entirety. So that's the folder path, followed by a slash, followed by the file name. And the way we create the file name is we take this thing, which is the folder path, and this is identified by going to the master.mailmerge data source, then looking at an item called data fields for the one that's named doc folder path, and returning its value. So this will return the value of the doc folder path for the row that is the active record. So the row we're exporting, this will return the doc folder path value. We then use the ampersand. It's just like in Excel, it adds 2 bits of strings together. So we add in a backslash, and then we do the same for the doc file name. And so this is retrieved, and finally we add on the docx at the end. So this builds up one single string, which is the folder path and file name combined, and this is provided as the file name so we know where to save the document. Finally, we have this file format here, which is simply saying save as a docx document. That's the new version rather than the 97 document of the last century. So the export as fixed file format is very, very similar. Export as fixed file format is a generic name for the PDF export, and we have an output file name rather than just simply file name, but it is assembled in pretty much the same way. We have the PDF folder path, backslash, and then the name of the file followed by PDF. And finally, we tell it we want to export as PDF as opposed to another format. So these lines, although they're spread over 4 lines and look very complicated, they're relatively simple and are built up of these monstrosities here, which, as long as they are simply return the field from the current row, which has the name given in these quotes here and in the brackets. So that's it. That covers the entire macro. All I've said here is presented to you in this green text on the right, so please feel free to read that. But that is it. We have done our mail merge to PDF. The results are here. We are ready to go and send these out via email. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful. As mentioned before, we've got another video where we use Word mail merge and a macro to create a better email system where we can actually send attachments to people. So please do check that out. On top of that, please obviously do check out our website. We've got a lot of tips and tricks and everything on there, which will help you systematize your work and reclaim your life. So thanks for watching. See you next time.